Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. Recently, Camerai put out a small video noting a post on the SC Leaks Discord based on something that Erin Roberts apparently said at the Korea Bar Citizen World Tour. It was that Squadron 42 is aimed to be completed in about 2 years, that this was an internal goal and not a hard date. Now, I'm really not going to give the rest of the Leaks post and Camerai's reaction much attention because an insinuation-laden leaks post is the wrong way to cover this, and Camerai's reaction was entirely predictable for his channel. And beyond that, the fact that CIG sees SQ42 to be 2 years out is obvious, because if they thought it was sooner, they would be behaving differently in building attention for the product, which is evident from, for example, the agenda on tomorrow's CitizenCon, again, not having a word about it. And the fact that the number is once again 2 years, as it has been ever since the start of the product, also seems predictable, not just for Squadron 42, but for other attempts at huge boundary-pushing games. For example, the exact same description, constantly 2 years from now, could also be applied to Grand Theft Auto 6. Starfield was mere months from an announced release, and then boom, another year out. Moreover, the fact that Squadron 42 has only an internal goal and not a timetable is also predictable for reasons that will become clearer as I go on. So I'm going to be looking at this phenomenon of what causes games to get stuck in development eddies and why it tends to always be in that 1 to 2 years out range. And I'm going to do it as a continuation from my prior video about the issues I had with calling the roadmap's progress tracker a progress tracker. Now, in that video, I noted that the progress tracker visually resembled a CPM Gantt chart and used that as a starting point for describing its deficiencies in actually tracking progress. And many knowledgeable commenters pointed out that that was not fair because the game industry does not manage itself by CPM anymore, which is true. It was only the visual resemblance that made it a good choice to start from. But CPM, far from being obsolete, still dominates many fields, particularly construction. And that is because the one thing it does really well is to give a hard move-in date to the owner and have nearly real-time visibility on anything that might change that move-in date. CPM is built for hard deadlines, and it became dominant in project management because just 2 years after publishing of the first academic paper on CPM came the most significant hard deadline in the history of mankind.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
The funny thing is, just a few minutes earlier, in the same speech, he framed the project management needed for the goal.
We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment.
And so project management, in the decades that followed, and many fields still today, followed the deadline and milestones-focused CPM approach because, damn it, that's how we got to the moon. But when applied to game programming, the focus on final deadlines and producing that goal disk led to something called crunch time. Weeks, if not months, of massive forced overtime, frequently unpaid, which was usually followed by divorce time, burnout time, and resignation time. And the code produced during crunch time had all the quality you would expect from chronically sleep-deprived and profoundly unhappy programmers. And so new management techniques were developed that focused on managing a steady flow of features through the development process. These new management techniques are now generally grouped together under the title of one of them, Agile Development. Deadlines and timetables were strictly eschewed by these new theories because they believed, with good cause, that as soon as you brought back deadlines and timetables, you would bring back crunch. And getting rid of crunch for good was one of the top items on their list. So that was why it was entirely predictable that when Erin Roberts described 2 years as only an internal goal, because that's as close to a deadline as Agile Development ever gets. That's why when questions are constantly ignored in Q&A, because when questions lead to deadlines, and deadlines lead to crunch, and crunch is verboten under Agile management principles. So now I need to step back and point out that I have not been briefed on CIG's internal management practices. So everything I am saying beyond this point is speaking in general about these Agile techniques, not about how they are being used in CIG. And my only clue that they are being used at all comes from clues in CIG's own description of things. But the clues aren't subtle. The first Agile method, and this is more of a concept than a practice, is the Waterfall. The waterfall envisions every deliverable is going through a discrete set of phases, each figuratively pouring their contents into the next. Again, steady flow being the goal. And most obvious manifestation of the waterfall concept in CIG is the ship pipeline. Concept pours to white box, into gray box, into final art, into polish. And every ship, not to mention other complex non-ship game assets like bases, flow through the same process. The next agile method that I suspect CIG uses is called Kanban, which was developed by Toyota and comes from the Japanese word for signal. And if you ever walk into a programming office and see a board covered with neatly organized Post-it notes, there's a good chance that somebody is practicing Kanban management. Typically, Kanban organizes into 4 columns: to do, working, testing, and finished. Some further divide the items between those ready to move on and those not ready to move on, and some put a space at the bottom for items in that state, but blocked. Now, the key to effective Kanban is that you never put more items into the active or testing area than the team can actually be working on now. It prevents them from being overwhelmed at the number of possibilities of what they could be working on now, and instead to just pay attention on the ones that they should be working on now. In fact, one of the interesting things about Kanban is how well it scales down. If you're feeling overwhelmed in your personal to-do list, a few Post-it notes and a blank bit of wall, and you have your own personal Kanban organizer. So why do I think CIG uses Kanban? Well, in Kanban courses and software, each item is called a card. They are called cards because Post-it notes are a trademark of 3M. But every roadmap roundup, when they talk about something on the release view being moved or having its status changed, they talk about the card changing. That's Kanban terminology. The final agile method that I suspect CIG uses is called Scrum, which is a term in rugby roughly equivalent to the American football line of scrimmage. Its main goal is monitoring productivity in the programming phase. With Scrum, there is a queue of backlog of items. The team pulls one or is assigned one, and then it goes through one or more cycles of effort, often taking about 30 days. During this time, there is every day a quick check-in meeting, which everybody says what they did in the prior day, what they're going to do in the upcoming day, and if there are any obstacles. These stand-up meetings is one of the main benefits of Scrum. Procrastination is avoided, which can be a real problem with developers, and issues do not stay hidden. Now, why do I think that CIG uses some sort of implementation of Scrum? Well, these larger outer loops of effort are called sprints. Now, where have I heard the term sprints before?
Sprint report, sprint report, sprint report.
So without specifically saying so, CIG has tipped their hand that they're using some combination of waterfall concepts and Kanban and Scrum practices. So, how in that environment did you get to the point of saying that your internal goal is 2 years? Well, in general, you look at the things in the to-do column or in the queue and do some rough calculations and gut reactions and say, yeah, it looks like we could get through those in 2 years. But I'm sure your reaction is that, well, sure, but in 2 years, they're going to add a whole bunch of new items to the queue. And to that, some will say, yeah, that's kind of the flaw of Agile development. And others will say, yeah, that's the feature of Agile development. That's the thing that puts agility into Agile development. Its ability to adapt, to prioritize new feature requests without disruption of the level flow of daily work of the programmer. No sudden shifting of priorities and tasks because there's a new critical path. No months of crunch time because somebody said to a group of people that it had to be finished before the end of the decade. But yes, perpetual development because of feature creep is indeed a potential with Agile development. But why 2 years? Because this Hanger module video from 9 years ago looks 9 years old, not because it was badly made, but because it was made with 9-year-old tools on 9-year-old systems. And most graphic cards manufacturers are on 2-year product generations. For example, with NVIDIA, GTX 1000 in 2016, RTX 2000 in 2018, RTX 3000 in 2020, and RTX 4000 in 2022. Every 2 years, there's a new set of expectations from the state of the art, and another generation of cards becomes, nobody seriously uses those anymore. Hardware ray tracing cores have gone from being a future promise to commonplace. 1440 and 4K resolutions went from being absurd for 24-inch screens to, of course, for 36-inch screens. Frame rates beyond 60 went from being pointless because monitors were all 60 Hz refresh to common expectations from anybody running game benchmarks. 2 years is just the time that when you start looking at the stuff you made 2 years ago, and especially 4 years ago, you say, at 4K, these eyes don't look just right. The hair doesn't look just right. The sheets don't deform believably. Hate to say it, but we're going to need a polish pass on these, or fans are going to be complaining about how it looks. So what should CIG do? You think I know? Unfortunately, this is one of those situations where the more you understand the problem, the more you understand that you don't know the solution. You only know how to better explain the problem. And now for an update on our Grow the Channel Ship giveaway. As of recording, we are at 92% of the subscriber goal and 94% of the membership goal, or the IAE Expo, whichever happens first, to give away to some lucky player their choice of the Anvil Liberator, the Shipping Ship for shipping your ships, or the Misk Odyssey, the long-length look-ahead launcher lorry. Members prior to the publication of the winning video are entered automatically, and if the winner is a member as of the publication date of the winning video and at the drawing time, remember that if you've let your membership expire, they will win both the Liberator and the Odyssey. For non-members, just subscribe and comment with the secret word. And the secret word for this video is the period of time that Agile Development did away with. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Danny Raymond for Ray's Guide.